everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I'm looking forward to fall. After kind of a warm spell, I'm looking forward to the temperatures changing a little because I love fall.
Starting to drop just a little bit, the temperatures. We're getting towards a more fall-like atmosphere. Yeah, it's coming. And that's good.
Crisp days, bright blue skies and crisp temperatures. Well, I love fall.
The change of sunlight is the big thing for me. I notice that so much now.
Yes, as it gets lower on the horizon, one thing that I like is that the shadows get longer because the sun's getting lower on the horizon, and fall has a totally different look to it, just light-wise, sunlight-wise.
Well, then certainly when you start seeing, like when the trees start dropping their leaves, you get that lower sunlight, you get, in a way, more sun coming through, you get more light. It's lesser, but because it's not being blocked by the leaves. Yeah,
and I enjoy taking some photos of like things that are coloring up in fall, and even the fall perennials. I enjoy taking some photos this time of year because the shadows and everything look different than they do in the high sun of summertime. So I'm enjoying even taking a few extra photos this time of year.
And let's face it, for gardeners who have been busy working in their garden for the past 5 plus months, maybe, it's good to have a little slowdown. It's good for things to we have some time to sit back and relax and kind of enjoy these nice days, enjoy the sights around, and
it's plan for next year already, and just the change of work, the change in tasks and everything. Yeah, so I'm definitely ready for that change.
Yeah. Well, one of the sites we've been taking in, we're going to be talking about today, and that's mums. Those are probably the most not sure if I want to say popular, but one of the most obvious blasts of color that we're seeing out there right now. And so we're going to be talking about that today. But you've got a question from our listener first.
I do. Tom writes in, "Hello, John and Don. I have waited to pick my apples. They're Harrelson varieties. I've waited to pick them until we get a number of frosts because I know they develop a sweetness after we've had cool temperatures. But how low can the temperature go before those apples will be damaged?"
Oh, good
Well,
question.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for writing. And yes, the late apple varieties, those that hang on the tree and are meant to be harvested late, Harrelson is a typical one. Honeycrisp is one of the later varieties too. And yes, definitely they do become sweeter. As temperatures get chillier, the starches convert to sugars. And so, yes, many people prefer to leave their Harrelson apples on the tree as long as possible. And, unless they're actually starting to drop from the tree, which, if the fall was long enough, eventually those apples are going to start dropping. But if they aren't doing that, then leaving them on the tree. So how low can the temperatures go before you actually have to pick those? Well, the temperatures can go all the way down to 23 to 25 degrees. Apples have kind of a natural antifreeze type solution in. Maybe it's the sugars and starches and different things. So apples do not have to be picked when there's a frost forecast. So you can leave your apples on the tree until it's going to be sometimes forecast below 25 degrees or so. But if the days are not going to get above freezing, then I would pick the apples. But if it's just going to dip down to 25 for the night and back above freezing, then you can leave those apples on kind of as long as you want and then go ahead and harvest.
Well, hopefully you have a good long season of looking at those apples on the tree. That would be great.
Very much so. And anyone who wants to send in questions, we do get some emails about your successes as well, beautiful flower gardens and etc. Someone sent me a beautiful photo from the spring. Their lilac did so beautifully in the spring. And so
great.
I wanted to share that. So the email, Donald.Kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu.
All right. Well, let's talk about mums, because whether you're going into a grocery store or going into a business or driving through a neighborhood, you see these out on people's steps in their yards. These big, beautiful domed colors, whether they're big, bright yellow or kind of a violet or kind of a rusty red, great color
Lots
right
of colors.
now. Lots of colors. The mums are just,
And they're sold all over the place. They're absolutely beautiful. It's hard to walk by the grocery store or the garden center or the national chain store. It's hard to walk by without buying one because they are so beautiful. Just mound shaped. The entire plant is covered with blossom and pots that you can put out on your doorstep and enjoy, or kind of add to a landscape even, just set the pot out in your landscape. Beautiful.
So with these mums that you could go out and buy in a store, a lot of times we suggest, don't buy flowering plants because you want to experience the flowers. Don't buy something that's already flowering, so it may not last as long as something that's yet to flower. If you're buying something now like these mums, how long will mums last generally?
Yeah, and of course, the beauty of these big fall potted mums is that they're instant color and instant impact.
Yeah.
So when you buy them, I guess one thing to look for is blossoms yet to open. They will be in bud, but if they're fully all the way opened, and if you're starting to see a little bit of flowers going downhill, that mum may be going downhill. Mm-hmm. So if you can choose one that has plenty of buds yet to open. And a very important thing with these potted mums is they are water thirsty. So every day, really, they should be watered. If they're allowed to dry out and wilt, that's going to affect the long-lasting blossom on that. That'll greatly reduce the length of time that they'll stay in good blossom. So make sure that they're watered well, kept watered. It's really impossible to overwater them because they're in pots that have drainage, so the excess is going to drain out. Now, one thing, whenever we talk about mums, I remember when I was kind of catching the gardening bug, probably in junior high, I suppose, and my mom always had mums in the perennial garden. We're going to talk about how to perennialize mums for your flower garden. But anyway, Mom had mums in her perennial garden. And I remember doing some reading, and I thought, okay, I'm seeing the word mum, and I'm seeing the word chrysanthemum. And so I remember thinking, well, are those two different things? Is a mum a type of chrysanthemum? Is one hardy, one not hardy? And no, mum is simply a shortened version of chrysanthemum. Yeah, it's easier to say. And we can always do jokes about mum's the word.
Right.
And so anyway, mum, chrysanthemum, the same thing. The chrysanthemum is the botanical genus for these plants. So mum is just a shortened version of that. So anyway, other things with these large potted mums, they look so beautiful, in the fall. Pumpkins and these big decorative mums, maybe a straw bale or two, and you've got a fall decoration made.
Yeah.
And the mums, these potted mums, can take a little bit of light frost. If it's going to get too far below 30, I think I'd maybe set them indoors a little bit and then back, or in the garage maybe, so that they'll take a little bit of light frost. But if we got a very severe hard freeze, that could shorten them. And now one of the discussions with these that's commonly asked question is, are these big potted mums, are they the type that we could plant out into our perennial gardens? So can we plant those? And will they come back each year? Now, these mums were specially selected to bloom very well in pots. And they are not the best ones to plant in our perennial gardens. In a little bit, we'll get into the types that are best to add into the perennial garden, the named cultivars that are best. But, you have nothing to lose with these big potted ones. If you have a perennial garden and you'd like to try planting them out in that, well, you don't have much to lose. So I will suggest to people, go ahead, plant them out in the perennial garden, see what happens. You're enjoying them now.
If you've got an area where maybe it's a little microclimate, where an area where it's maybe a little bit more doesn't exposure to as much wind.
Maybe catch a little more snow cover, more insulating snow, or maybe add some leaf cover to them when fall when everything shuts down for fall. Maybe add some leaf cover to those. And a microclimate is a good idea. And so either while you're enjoying these, plop them into the perennial garden or landscape, or even after the blossom is gone, if the leaves are still nice and green and you've maintained it as a healthy plant, maybe try planting them out. Of gardeners who have tried that, I would say the response back has been maybe 50-50 of success. Maybe a little less than that. Again, those big potted ones that are so beautiful for us to enjoy aren't always the best types to add for your perennial garden. And so we're gonna devote kind of the rest of the podcast to talking about how can we add these beautiful fall blooming mums to our perennial garden, because there's some definite steps that we can take to make them part of our perennial garden, even though these big decorative ones are mainly to enjoy kind of instant beauty for fall. But we're going to talk about adding those, because we can add mums to the perennial garden, and we'll talk about how to do it.
All right, let's take a quick little break. We'll jump right back in.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
All right, we're back, and we're talking about maybe kind of like one of the ultimate fall colors that you can find in your garden, and that's the mum. These are predominant right now. You're seeing them all around, and we're talking a little bit about maybe how to grow them in your own garden.
Because we've talked about designing perennial gardens and the importance of having perennials that bloom in spring, some that bloom in summer. And of course, that's the beauty of a perennial garden. It's forever changing, and these perennials have their specific times of bloom, and that makes it just ever changing and ever beautiful. And so also adding perennials that bloom in the fall of the year. So we've got good color. And mums is one of those. Perennial mums can be the absolute fall showstopper in your perennial garden, in amongst your tulips, your peonies, your iris, your daylilies, and everything else. And then in the fall of the year, when everything else is done blooming, mums kick in. And so mums can be just absolutely the queen of a perennial garden. And they can be blooming when the snow flies. But so it's interesting. So the desire of perennial gardeners to have fall blooming mums that we can rely on. Okay. And as we mentioned, we can't always rely on those big potted decorative ones that are sold in the fall. We can't always rely on those to be a winter hardy perennial. So this has been long desired to develop something. In fact, back in 1947, there was an NDSU circular that was written on the culture of perennial mums in northern gardens. And it describes the need to carefully choose winter hardy varieties that bloom within our season's length. And it says there weren't many to choose from. And so so it's important to realize that mums are a perennial, but they aren't always a winter hardy perennial wherever we're located.
Right.
So there's lots of mums that would be perennial in other locations, but for us, we need the winter hardy varieties and cultivars. So way back in 1947, they were on the search of winter hardy types. They're telling gardeners, be careful that you choose wisely. Okay. So the search for winter hardy perennial mums. Well, University of Minnesota has been searching for those types way back into the 1930s. They started, University of Minnesota started a mum breeding program. And so looking for these winter hardy types of mums. And now it's interesting. They discovered in their search for hardy mums, they discovered a type of mums that they termed the cushion mums, in which the entire mum plant was covered with blossoms. The entire face, kind of this rounded pillow-like cushion of plant habit, entirely covered.
They are just almost like perfect domes, aren't they?
So those are the type that you see potted up. So anyway, they were working on, for a perennial garden, these types, and they termed them cushion mums. So all the way from the soil on up around to the top and all the way down the other side, covered with these blossoms. So in the 1970s, they started developing some of these. See, some of the older types were more upright and the blossoms were just up on the top and maybe the base was a little scraggly. I remember my mom had an old type. I still remember the name, called Clara Curtis mum. But today's mums are greatly improved. So anyway, in the 1970s, Minnesota developed a series called the Min series, MINN series, that had increased winter hardiness. And so all of them had Min in the name, Min Autumn, kind of a beautiful scarlety coppery, Min Yellow, Min Ruby, Min White. And so you will see those offered today, the Min series. You'll see those offered in the garden centers. And kind of towards the end of our podcast, we'll go through like 7 steps for getting these to really come back each year. So that Min series, and so at garden centers in the spring, you will oftentimes find the Min series, but you'll need to kind of search them out. So the Min series, good increased hardiness. And also another variety that they developed was the Mammoth series. In a whole group of mum seedlings, they found some that had large height, large size, and they had increased winter hardiness. They labeled those all the Mammoth series. And the Mammoth series, there's a number of different colors. There's a kind of a pinkish and a yellow and kind of a coppery orange one. And so now I have seen the Mammoth series offered at garden centers in the spring of the year, and they have increased winter hardiness. Now, mums, any of the mums, even the ones that have more winter hardiness, they're a little borderline, I suppose. So They like the microclimate that you described, and they also like a little bit of leaf cover. Now, I've got a Mammoth Yellow that has bloomed reliably every fall for at least the last 6 years.
Okay.
And without doing extra cover.
Okay.
So to develop perennial mums in your flower garden, the Min series and also the Mammoth series would be 2 very good ones to check for. I've also noticed you can order some of those online. I've located them online, and they'll send you in the springtime.
Okay.
They will send you a little potted starter plant of these different mum series. And so that's that would be the place to start, is getting the right varieties. And after a short break, let's talk about 7 keys in getting mums to become part of your winter hardy perennial garden.
That sounds good.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back. This week we're talking about mums, and we're talking about how to have a perennial mum in your garden, how to have this from year to year, how to have that great, vibrant fall color in your garden. So you've got some
I've got a 7-step recipe for that. Okay, number 1 we've already talked about, and that is to choose the varieties that have been developed to be winter hardy for zones 3 and 4. And Minnesota has led the charge on that, and so the Min series and the Mammoth series. So those would be good cultivars to start with. So that's step number 1, choose a winter hardy variety. And number 2, is to plant them in the spring. Okay, in the fall, when we see all these mums, that's not the time to be planting them. They need to be planted in the spring so that they have the entire growing season to develop a root system and a crown that's capable of overwintering. So in the spring of the year, visit your locally owned garden centers and look for those mum starts, those transplants. They'll usually be potted up and actively growing, and then you plant them in the spring, get them growing, give them good care all during the growing season, and then in the fall of the year, they'll reward you with bloom. And they bloom very generously the first year.
Okay.
We've talked about peonies and different things that you need to be patient with, 3 years, 4 years, and then you'll get some good bloom. Mums will bloom beautifully the first fall from planting, and it's perfectly fine to let them do their thing.
Okay.
So plant in the spring. Okay, the third part of this recipe, locate in full sun. They're a full sun perennial. So do that, and also plant them in a little microclimate or a spot that gets good winter snow cover. That's good insulation.
Okay.
If it's a perennial bed, not too far from your sidewalk, well, when you're snow blowing, blow some extra snow on or do some shoveling and add a little bit of extra insulation. They're not really for windswept winter areas. If it's an area where the wind blows all the snow off, that would not be the best mum area. So give them a little bit of a protection. Okay, the fourth step is to fertilize generously during the growing season. Mums are heavy feeders, and if you give them a good dose of fertilizer in May about planting time, and then maybe once a month, could be the water-soluble type or a granular flower fertilizer, but fertilize them well so that they'll they'll develop good plant structure and lots of buds in time. But now we've talked about July 4th being the Independence Day for gardeners. And so also same with mums. Even though we fertilize during the first half of the season, July 4th, stop the fertilizing of mums. The reason for that is if you fertilize mums the last half of the growing season, they'll be a little more tender. With all that extra nutrition, they'll be a little tender and more apt to winter freeze out.
Okay.
The last half, you need to let them toughen up a little bit and get ready for winter. All right. The fifth part of this recipe is they'll grow all summer, begin blooming when the shorter days of fall arrive. See, many of the mum varieties are triggered by the short days, and so that's why it's important to plant these cultivars that are adapted to our northern areas. See, if the day length were to stay too long, they may not bloom. And so they're triggered into blooming and setting buds when the days get shorter and also by the cooler temperatures. And most mums are frost tolerant. So if they're forecasting the low 30s of frost, there's really no need to cover them and protect them because they'll tolerate some light frost, which is why they'll keep blooming right on through up until the snowfall, and sometimes even after the snow. It's been kind of pretty. Sometimes when you get maybe a early November snowfall and you've got the snow and your mum is still blooming, those just make for classic fall photos. The sixth part of the recipe is to leave the tops, the above ground portion of the plant, leave those intact over winter. And that has been shown repeatedly to help overwintering of mums. So leaving the above ground portion on all winter, it helps catch snow. It'll catch a few leaves and things. It'll make protection easier because it'll hold the protection, leaves or straw, in place. And so there's a direct correlation to leaving those tops on and best winter survival. Very important for that. And then you should prune off the above ground portions, the dead part that dies over winter. Prune that off in early spring before the new growth starts. New growth will probably start popping up out of the soil around the first part of May or so. So make sure they're cut back before that happens. And in the fall of the year, cover maybe with 12 to 24 inches of leaves, just in case we don't get any snow cover. And if it's an open, bare, exposed winter, in which they're more prone to freezing out. So I also think it's a good insurance policy to cover the mum plants. And we'd be looking at around probably the first part of November, maybe the middle of November, after the mums have had enough freezes that they're actually going dormant. Okay, because now, as we mentioned, they're oftentimes still blooming under the first early snows, but let them get kind of dormant and then apply the mulch. So maybe that's even closer towards the end of November. And so the good winter mulch will help prevent the freezing and thawing. Without the winter mulch or without insulating snow, the freezing and thawing of mums can literally heave them out of the ground. They aren't a very deeply rooted perennial, and so they can easily heave out if we get a lot of freezing and thawing during winter time. You know, there is another way. I'll maybe add this as step 7.5. There's another way that you can winter mums, and that would be in the fall of the year, take a little sprig of growth from the outer perimeter of the mum, that's been growing out in your flower bed. Take a little sprig from the outer perimeter, pot it up, and grow it on your windowsill.
Okay.
They're capable of growing all winter long. Maybe next spring cut it back a little bit, but then use that as a new start to plant out
so you
in
can
May.
propagate from.
So you could propagate. Yes, they're very easy to propagate.
Oh.
And so if the plant overwinters fine, if we do all the right things and Mother Nature smiles on us, those mums will survive winter. And then next spring, you'll have a very nice clump, and you can divide that clump. And so you'll have more mums. Where you maybe had one mum, you can easily maybe make 4 mums. And those divisions that you reset in the spring will easily bloom in the fall of the year. One beautiful thing about mums is when you plant them, dig, divide, plant, start a new plant in the spring, they bloom beautifully that first year, that first fall. Now, 2 winters ago, and we didn't have enough snow cover, and I didn't cover them. I had bought a couple of mums. They were the Igloo series, and I thought, well, Igloo, snow, Eskimos, igloos, maybe
sounds right for our
chance.
area.
Well, they didn't end up overwintering. They were not the Min series or the Mammoth series, and they ended up not wintering, and I didn't get around to covering them, so I did lose them. But, even so, when I had planted those in the spring, they were spectacular in the fall of the year. So even though those didn't winter for me, I got my money's worth. It was a beautiful fall color. I had yellow ones and some burgundy ones. And so it was still successful. Even if planted in the spring, beauty in the fall, it was still a success.
Just out of curiosity, do you know if mums is that something that really attracts deer and rabbits? Are they that kind of food for those critters?
Well, that's a good question. And we always say, if those creatures are hungry enough, they'll eat almost anything.
That's true.
But, mums have a very distinctive foliage aroma to them, kind of a little bit of a spicy, a mum scent. And so I do not believe those are probably the preferred. Okay, now the years that I have had mums, the rabbits did not bother them. And so anecdotally, they didn't ruin my mums the way they do some lilies and a few things like that. And so deer, I don't believe I've ever seen those on the deer's preferred plant list.
Okay.
And so, but that's a good question. That's uppermost on the minds of many gardeners are things, Okay, because it was interesting. We've talked about burning bush euonymus as being rabbit candy.
Yep.
And I was visiting with somebody just the other day that said, "Oh gosh, we're so excited. They planted a burning bush this spring, and it's coloring up nice." And I mentioned, boy, it'd be really nice to protect that here over winter because the rabbits do tend to find them easily. But mums, I'm not sure. I believe with the kind of scent, I think that probably acts as a little bit of a natural deterrent.
Well, and also this seems like they don't seem to be as tender. They're a bit more structurally sound. They seem to be a little bit more sturdy, because they go upright. They don't flop. They are upright. They are strong stemmed. And so I wonder if that's maybe
a little more difficult for a rabbit to ruin them the way they do the true lilies.
Yeah.
And some of those. The true lilies, the rabbits can nibble off all the leaves and leave you one bare stem.
Yeah.
It would be a little harder for them to destroy a very branchy mum. It's a good point, John.
Now you've got me excited. I think I'm going to try a mum next year.
Yes,
I just have to find the right area where we get a lot. We don't get a lot of full sun in our yard. So got to find the right spot for it, but that would be a fun one to try.
Yes, I am mumless this fall.
Okay.
So I think we created a new word, mumless.
Mumless.
Yes, I'm mumless this fall, but definitely next spring I'm going to plant some of these. When I say I'm mumless, I do have that one yellow mammoth mum, but I want more.
Right. Well, who wouldn't? I mean, all that great kind of fall color to have right now, especially as other things have kind of they've peaked. And mum's really coming into peak right now. It's just a great thing to look at.
Exactly. And, I get the biggest kick out of when we get that first snowfall and you've got the mums and the snow and its beauty.
Excellent. Well, so if people have questions for you, whether it's about raising mums or anything else, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, Kinzler. The reason I always spell it is because it would be easy to put an S in.
Yes.
And if it has an S in, and then I don't receive it. Donald.Kinsler, Kinsler with a Z, Ler, at ndsu.edu.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, John, and thanks everyone for listening.